independent thoughts, independent life. This is Chad Benson.
Everybody needs to relax. She is on the job. She is getting things done. Ladies and gentlemen, the Vice President of the United States of America in Poland.
I am here, standing here on the eastern flank of NATO to reaffirm our commitment, the United States commitment to Poland and our NATO allies.
Yeah, nothing to worry about, kids. Another round of talks today. This time, the last couple days, what I find encouraging is the fact that it's in Turkey. And the reason for that is because one of the people, and if you listen to the show, and if you've missed any of it, grab the podcast. Our buddy Mike Lyons, the military analyst, has talked about one of the few people on the planet that could maybe reach Putin in a way where he might pay some attention. And again, I don't know. Xi might be it, and I don't even know if that's true, because the reality is that they're both just criminals. And I don't know if you guys ever watch any movie. Criminals tend to do horrible things to one another, right? They're only as good as they need to be to each other. And then when that need is no longer being met or needed, then they drop each other. But Erdogan may have a chance to push him through. But they met today. Nothing came out of it. They're trying hard. This is Dmytro Kubala.
The broad narrative that he conveyed to me is that they will continue their aggression until Ukraine meets their demands. And the list of those demands is a surrender. And this is why it's not why it is not acceptable to us. Yeah.
He is their foreign affairs minister. Lavrov was there, too. And Lavrov, of course, is the spokeshole for the Pooter. He kind of he said today, well, yeah, it's probably not going to be any nuclear war. We don't really want it. And they he also said this to me just shows you everything you need to know. They're not going to be invading anybody else, and this wouldn't be happening right now had the Ukrainians not invaded them. It's like the world knows. Twitter, by the way, has set up something so people in Russia can avoid any of their blocking of stuff. And the reality is their blocking of stuff isn't very good. People are easily getting around any of this stuff, and they're seeing what's going on. They're understanding that this is getting ugly. They're understanding what took place yesterday was a war crime. And, of course, the bombing of a hospital and maternity ward and the killing of children.
There are images coming out of Mariupol of mass graves, just burying people in trenches. It's just horrible. And we can't confirm the 1,300, but, we do know that there are many, many dead there. There are thousands still trapped inside what is an ongoing hell. Nationally, at least 2.1 million people have now fled the country, most of them to Poland. Around half of them, children. Horrific numbers, but...
Yeah. So we know what's going on. The younger generation is understanding what's going on over there. And the question remains, as more and more businesses, Western businesses, not just American, but Western businesses across the globe, and really global businesses, Australian, any start to pull away, can these economic sanctions that are crushing them, is this going to be enough that, it's going to cause any kind of capitulation with Putin? That I don't know. People keep asking, and I see it everywhere, is he coup-proof? I don't know if anybody is coup-proof in a situation like that, but the reality is at this moment in time, yeah. Now, 2 months down the road, and the fear is, and this is, Sun Tzu said it, right? Like you never basically box your opponent in. You want to give them an area of which they can escape, because when you turn somebody into a desperate human being, that's when they're the most dangerous. Case in point, we always talk about it. Somebody who, when you see people run, right? You see them run. Police. Why are they running from the police? This person is going to jail forever. There is no get out of jail card. There is none of this. This is their X amount of strikes, or they've done something so heinous they know they're going to be locked up. So the desperation kicks in, and they're like, well, I'm going to take as many with me as possible. So coup-proof? At this moment, yes. But is there still an off-ramp? And is the world, this is the other side of it, is the world ready to go, he's committed tons of crimes. The guy should be, he should be Ceausescu, if you don't know who he is. Murdered by his people, Romanian dictator. Awful, right? Gaddafi, Saddam. He should be that, right? He should be in a situation where he's brought before the people or a tribunal, and so are we prepared to say, well, if we can contain him and we could stop this slaughter, are we willing to accept that? It's a big question. 323-538-2423 at Chad Benson Show's your Twitter. Tweet at us, text the program. We'll talk a lot about this today, tons of it, and how it affects us. Well, simply this, continuing to see inflation. It's getting ugly.
The government's consumer price index surged 7.9% in February from the same month a year ago. That's another 4-decade high. The CPI report showed price hikes were broad-based in food, gas, and housing. Some economists had hoped this month could mark a peak in inflation. But with energy prices soaring again, more records will likely be broken in the months ahead.
Yeah, and that's just the beginning. We're starting to feel it. Now, Jen Psaki, who is, first of all, condescending, secondly, is just like all of them. They go out there and lie. And it's ridiculous. She gets asked real questions about the inflation numbers.
What specifically can you point to that has worked to bring down inflation?
Well, there are a number of steps we've taken. If you compare month to month, we've seen inflationary pressure or inflationary numbers go down month to month.
Okay. Is that true? Well, let's take a look. January 2021, 1.4%. Then it was 1.7, 2.6, 4.2, 5, 5.4, 5.4, 5.3, 5.4, 6.2 in October, 6.8 in November, 7, 7.5, and now another jump. No, that's a lie. I'm looking at the actual chart. They've not gone down month to month. You're lying. You're full of it. That's what she does. And the oil production thing is the other side of it, which is baloney. We're going to have a Rory Johnston, who has a great Substack, is going to come on later. He's an oil and gas analyst and expert. He's going to talk about what's going on in the world in oil and gas. What can we do? Why aren't they drilling? There's a lot of things that go into that. And, it's so funny because Ducey and her get into it all the time because, quite frankly, Ducey's asking some questions that are real, and the talking point is the same thing.
And there are 9,000 unused approved drilling permits. So I would suggest you ask the oil companies why they're not using those if there's a desire to drill more.
Okay. Well, there's a reason for that. First and foremost, that's your talking point is 9,000. There's 9,000 of those. Yeah, that's true. Some of them are dry. They don't work. There's nothing in there, right? So those leases are useless, period. Case closed. There's nothing in there that's worth a damn. Secondly, what kind of manpower do we need? Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's that too. Okay. Then you've got to go through how do I get it to market? Because are you going to take away all my stuff, right? You're going to kill this pipeline or that pipeline? So marketplace is one of them. The third thing is these things they have to be explored, even if we don't know what's in the lease. So you go and you explore them. That costs a ton of money. With the unsure ability for you guys to promise that, hey, if we find something that you're not going to say, well, you know what, you can't bring it out of here, or the regulations, or all you come up with all of these, hey, we got 9,000 of these. The reality is most of the ones that are working today aren't on federal lands, they're in private places. So on private land, well, you know what? I'm not worried about what's going on. I'm going to follow the regulations I'm supposed to follow, but I'm going to bring this out. And outside of paying the mineral rights to the owner of the land, I'm not really worried at this moment in time. But I also know it's here. There's so many things that go into it. So the 9,000 makes it seem like it's a flip of the switch. It's not. It takes tons of money. It takes time. There's a lot of things that go into it. And we can do it faster than most. But it's a false narrative that there's all of this stuff just hanging around. And if we just go get it, it'll be fine. As if they've had nothing to do with any of the stuff that's going on. You fight the oil and gas companies all the way to the bank. They're bad, they're evil. Today, Elizabeth Warren, because I think we're going to do I'm going to propose some sort of like wealth tax thingy to help all the, and you're like, okay, why didn't you do that with the pharmaceutical companies? Because the narrative for you with the pharmaceutical companies, how wonderful they are, how amazing they are at this moment in time, because they helped you in a political situation that you used to your advantage. Oil and gas is evil. Continue to lie over and over and over again. It's politics. I understand that, but it's a day and age where we can go check these things out. It's not hard. Yeah, the oil and gas companies? What, are you going to force them to drill? Hey, you got to do this or else. Well, why? Why do they have to? I'm curious. I mean, why would you push them to drill? Because politically, right now, you need it. You understand what's coming up. As oil and gas rise, your numbers fall. 323-538-2423 at Chad Benson Shows your Twitter. Tweet at us, text the program. A lot of stuff to get to. Pig Heart guy, remember him? Tragic news. Yeah, the babe. Talk about that. Burglary tourism. If you don't know what that is, kids, get ready for it because, wow. I don't even know what to say at this moment in time. It's just insane. It is. What's not insane is the great deals at MyPillow. Right now, go to mypillow.com/Benson. Use promo code Benson. When you do that, it's amazing. Get all these amazing deals. 6-day money-back guarantee. Everything's made right here in the United States of America. In many cases, you get 10-year warranties from the Giza Dream Sheets to the amazing mattress topper, which I absolutely love. It's my favorite thing. To, yes, the MyPillow, the towels, the slippers, you name it, they have it. And right now, you're going to get a free Mike Lindell book about his life and his struggles with drugs, all the way up to becoming the CEO of, yes, MyPillow. Now's your chance to save big. You go to mypillow.com/Benson, BENSON. When you do that, you go through, you see all the massive deals. Boom, boom, boom. I want this. Boom. Then you type in code Benson, and away you go, and your savings begin. That's mypillow.com/Benson, mypillow.com/Benson. Use promo code Benson. Chad Benson Show.
The Chad Benson Show, where we reach across the aisle and occasionally poke someone in the eye.
He got himself a pig heart, and it only lasted 2 months. David Bennett Sr. passed away. He was 57 years old. He's at the University of Maryland Medical Center. Doctors didn't say what killed him. My assumption is, well, he was a hot mess before he got the pig heart, and then he died. And the reason they're not saying anything is probably because they're not quite sure. Hey, was it specifically the pig heart? Because he was already a mess before this. The hospital issued a statement. We are devastated by the loss to Mr. Bennett, who proved to be a brave and noble patient who fought all the way to the end. Dr. Bartley Griffin put that out. He performed the surgery in Baltimore. It was a landmark surgery. In 1984, baby Faye lived 21 days with a baboon heart. And he did 2 months. He did 2 months there. And the question is this like absolute proof that no, that can't happen? Remember, this wasn't just a pig heart. It's not like they just went down the store and got a pig. This was a genetically modified pig to grow a specific heart And that's what they did. He lasted 2 months, longer than the guy lasted who he stabbed. We forget about that, but we brought it up immediately. Hey, this guy stabbed a guy back in the day and paralyzed him, and the guy eventually died at 40 because the dude was hitting on his old lady at a bar. So the reality is we don't know. I mean, they're trying to grow them in labs. They're growing them on animals. You know, they've got the ear thing down pretty good, right? Where they're growing them on, the backs of pigs, things like that. But this is something wholly different. It's got a name, too. I was like, I'm going to screw this up. Xenotransplantation. Xenotransplantation. It's the whole thing with transplant is interesting. My son's aunt, who he calls Auntie, who is very, very sweet, she had a double lung transplant several years ago. And, it's a battle. She's, you just never know. Like every day you wake up, is your body going to start to reject that? You got to take anti-rejection medicine. You got to do all of these things. It's a tough thing. But Duke got a pig heart. Lasted 2 months, which was 2 months longer than he was going to live. Even though it was a pig heart. 323-538-2423. At Chad Benson Show is your Twitter. Tweet at us, text the program. Love hearing from all of you. People keep asking.
We know that the Russians are not going to achieve their political goals in the Ukraine. The Ukrainian military is not going to defeat the Russians. And so something has to happen on the battlefield where one side is going to be able to have the negotiating advantage and force the other to accept terms that they don't want.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about that. Remember when this first started, the negotiation was everybody surrender. You guys move. All the Nazis are handed over to us, which there's no Nazis. At least not in the leadership. We can talk a little bit about the other stuff later. But when all is said and done, we'll welcome you into the fold, maybe take away your statehood. And then it got to the point where, we'd like all of this stuff, and you guys can keep this. So we'll see what happens. But we're going to talk about what is the end game. A lot of stuff to talk about. Straight ahead, Chad Benson Show.
The Chad Benson Show.
Independent thoughts, independent life. This is Chad Benson.
Inflation is up. You knew that was going to happen. It's going to really start to feel ugly in the coming weeks and months because of what's going on in the Ukraine. Energy prices are jumping through the roof. The reality is that is not going anywhere anytime soon. I was just telling producer Phil, I know how an average family of four on $60,000 or $80,000 a year right now, depending on where you live, is cutting it at all. How hard that must be when you consider that, you're looking right now, if the average person is probably going to pay $1,500 to $2,500 extra a year in gas, and probably the same, if not more, on other things, goods, because of rising prices, if it stayed in a situation like this, and you're not getting that raise. Any raise you did get, that is being wiped out, and then you're going to the negative because of inflation. But you could get a raise because there's jobs available, and if you can't get one from your company, you always go somewhere else. Speaking of job numbers.
11,000 more people signed up for unemployment benefits last week than the week before. This is the first set of jobless numbers compiled since Russia invaded Ukraine. Separately, the Consumer Price Index has risen 7.9% over the past year, a 4-decade high for that closely watched economic indicator.
Yeah. How closer to a recession? Much closer than I think people realize. Gas prices are continuing to rise. Once again, how long?
Generally speaking, prices peak in the summertime. That is when we see prices continue to climb and are lower in February. That's not where we're seeing things now. The spring and summer driving season tends to send prices higher. And it's also the time when we switch over to summer fuel, which is more efficient. It releases fewer emissions, but it also costs more.
Yep. So we're heading in that direction. So be prepared for that anyways. A lot of this stuff was built in somewhat. And remember, there's a lagging situation here when it comes to gas prices. What we're feeling today, go back a week and look at oil. What we're going to feel next week is what we're feeling today, and that's what we're going to start to see. Oil prices yesterday came down a little bit, back up again today, and the reason is simple. What you saw yesterday was a lot of profit taking. People who had been in the futures market who have decided, hey, I'm getting out of this. I've got some profit. Let it settle. Buy back into it. Up about $5 today. Brent crude trading right around 116. So it's about earning more than your expenditures. And a lot of people are doing what? Last year we saw it, the big quit, right? And it was huge. It's amazing. And now Pew Research has finally got what they believe is the handle on why people quit. Oddly enough, number one, anyone? Yeah. Pay was too low. 63%. Also, number one, no advancement opportunities. 57, felt disrespected at work. 48% of people said childcare issues. 45% said not enough flexibility in hours. 43% of people say benefits weren't good. You know what you're not hearing? COVID. Working too many hours, 39%. Relocation, 35%. Working too few hours, 30%. COVID was the last on the list here for these at 18%. That's it. The COVID vaccine requirement. But outside of that, again, we started to move on from it. And that's why when we talk about, like, what are people worried about in the future, when you hear COVID being thrown around, it's not the virus, it's the reaction to the virus. Because there are still people out there that are saying things like, oh, well, hold on a second, the mask.
90% of people in the U.S. can take their masks off now. Who should still be wearing a mask and where?
I think a lot of people should be wearing masks in crowds. I'll still wear a mask in a crowd, and I'm not in a particularly high-risk group.
Outdoors, too?
Outdoors, less so. But if you're going to be in a crowded outdoor space, sure, I would leave a mask on.
Oh, God. Okay, why? Again, I mean, you got schools across the country that are still having some issues with masking. California's insane. I saw yesterday they raided a preschool, talking to 2-year-olds like, why aren't you wearing? I mean, it's that nuts. We had Adams, the mayor of New York, the other day, talking about that the 5-year-old kids can take your mask off, but the 4-year-olds can't. Because why? You don't know. You have no scientific evidence that can tell us why it's 4-year-olds that are, and under that are in real particular danger compared to their 5-year-old peers.
And while you're right that cases have dropped 95% over the last 2 months, that's from an unbelievably high number of daily cases. So we've dropped from about 1 million down to a little less than 50,000 cases per day. Low. We're much lower than we were, but there's still a significant amount of virus. And I think everyone has to judge their own risk and also gauge the risk of people around them and the people who they live with.
Yeah, I think that genie going back in the bottle is never going to happen the way they did before. It isn't. I think people are moving on with their lives. And they got other things going on. They do. They said, we listened, we heard, we found you're flopping, and your insanity too much for the average person. And the people that want to wear a mask, wear a mask. I mean, who cares? I mean, do I find it odd? If you're in a car by yourself or walking down the street by yourself and you're wearing a mask, do I find it ridiculous? Yes. If you go into a crowded room and you're worried, wear a mask. But don't try to force it on everybody else. These are the things we're dealing with at this point in time. All the while, we go across the world and we have a nightmare continuing to unfold in the Ukraine. And it is not getting better. It is getting, in many cases, worse. At this point in time, you've got to start looking at, okay, how exactly are we going to get the people in some of these areas that they have absolutely encircled them and are not allowing food, water, medical supplies, what are we going to do? But because we don't want to, it's this no-fly zone. And the whole thing with the Poland stuff, and yesterday, if you guys remember, we had our buddy Mike Lyons on our military house. He talks about, look, it's not that you just hand these planes over. You fly them, you have to restripe them. So they're Ukrainian airplanes. Then you have to get their pilots there, refit them, and train them on a new airplane, which could take 2 months to 6 months. It's not as if you're just handing somebody the keys to a car, and it's just a car. It doesn't work that way. So so the no-fly zone still, or giving them some sort of military assistance with that. And I think we're really just, sell semantics at this point. It's like you can have all of these lethal weapons, but you can't have that. And Putin knows where the stuff's coming from, right? He gets it. He understands that the javelins and the stingers and the bullets and the guns, and he knows they're coming from NATO countries. He's well aware of where this stuff's coming from. It wasn't like he's like, they really did that. What? That's crazy. But yesterday, the horrors of what took place at Mariupol.
Windows and walls blown out. President Zelensky tweeting videos from the site saying there were people, children under the wreckage, calling the attack an atrocity. Disturbing images show a pregnant woman as she was rescued from the rubble. Local officials aren't sure yet how many people may have been killed or wounded. The building had reportedly been largely empty. There was supposed to be a ceasefire in Mariupol today. Instead, Putin's warplanes hit a hospital for innocent children, mothers and medics. It was quickly condemned as almost certainly a war crime.
And they're not giving him the war crime status because they're still trying to get him to have some sort of reasonable, at this moment, if you can say that, moment of clarity where he steps away without the fear of going on trial at The Hague and then being hung. Was it Fiona Hill, the former ambassador, said that Putin saw like Mubarak and Saddam and Ceausescu and former Romanian leader who was murdered by his people because he was awful, and of course Libyan President Gaddafi, and he'd watch him over and over again with this whole thought of, oh my God, I can't let that happen to me. So his obsession with that, he's not, so you're always trying to give him an off-ramp where you hope he makes a decision that's in the best interest of everybody, but it's not happening. And then it goes back to, well, could there ever be a coup? It's got to get ugly. It's got to get so ugly that his people leave the people around him no choice. If they're going to save themselves, they'd have to act. And it's got to be because you have to hurt them in such a way that you leave them no choice.
The Kremlin is accusing the U.S. of an economic war on Russia, one day after President Biden's ban on Russian oil and other energy imports. Russia's now scrambling to prevent economic collapse under a steady crush of Western sanctions. For everyday Russians, the real financial hardships are still to come, but there's now real fear of what's ahead. In an attempt to keep businesses afloat, Russia's now waiving some taxes and offering some financial help while banning foreign currency purchases.
Yeah, because they know the ruble's not worth anything. The ruble is worth, what was it yesterday, Phil? Was it 7,000 rubles?
7,000ths of a cent.
Yeah. It's worth nothing. And the fear is they're going to just say, screw it, and default on all their foreign debt, which will hurt. Not just in the economic, there'll be a ripple, but it'll also hurt banks that may want to think in the future of helping emerging nations to loan money and say this is too risky. They were downgraded yesterday. You've got to make their people hurt so bad that they make a decision amongst themselves. We can't have this. You need to stop this. I just don't think he's in any want to do that. I think he thinks he's got what he wants, which is this bizarre invasion and his destiny, and he's going to ride it for as long as possible, and he's going to start to make it uglier and uglier and uglier. The big question for the West that needs to be answered is there a line that he would cross? Is chemical weapons that line? A tactical nuke, which is not what we think like the ICBMs and those kind of things that are killing 1 million people, but a more of a military grade tactical nuke over a small town that may kill 20 or 30,000 if this thing bogs down much longer and the pressure's on him to try to draw us into something. Where is that line? But his people are going to have to draw their own line. And they can't hide it. No matter how hard they try, they can take down all the TV stations and radio stations. They've got VPNs. They've got new Twitter has given people opportunities now to circumvent theirs. They're seeing all of this in real time, and they're going to have to make a choice too. The ones that didn't flee. And that choice isn't going to be whether or not the young are angry. It's how uncomfortable can the young make the parents or the older generation on what is happening and how bad it is that they too start to make a move. Not just the young, but everybody. 323-538-2423 at Chad Benson Show is your Twitter. Tweet at us. I keep going back to it, man. Knowing you're now going to be North Korea. Having known all of the goodies of the first and modern world. Twitter, iPhone, Netflix, all of that stuff. Knowing now you're going to be a subject of a half-cocked nut job who's trying to hell-bent on something, and now you are living in a situation where 2 months ago you were going to McDonald's, you're out on a date, right? You guys are planning a holiday to Spain, and now your ass is essentially planting potatoes. 323-538-2423 at Chad Benson Show is your Twitter. Tweet and text. A lot of stuff still to get to. We'll squeeze it in at CarShield. 24/7 roadside assistance, a rental car for free while your car's in the shop. The shop is the shop that you choose. They get them paid directly. Cars are getting more expensive. One of the big drivers right now for inflation is the fact that used cars in particular, the prices are through the roof. Not just the prices to fix them and the labor. So what are you doing to protect yourself? Well, you're gonna go check out CarShield. They got plans to fit anybody's budget, and it is awesome. It is. Over 1 million drivers have been helped by CarShield. Why not become one of them today? That check engine light comes on, you got nothing to be scared of. They're going to take care of everything for you. It's so simple. Go to carshield.com/Benson to save today an extra 10%. Carshield.com/Benson. Carshield.com/Benson saves you 10%. A deductible may apply. Chad Benson Show.
I can't take it anymore!
Well, get over it. It's time to forge a new path with your very own political cartographer, Chad.
15-time major champion was enshrined in the World Golf Hall of Fame last night.
Tiger Woods.
His 14-year-old daughter, Sam, introducing him, speaking of her father's past struggles, including the car crash last year that nearly killed him.
We didn't know if he'd come home with 2 legs or not.
Woods then taking the stage, getting emotional.
I just lost a bet to Stricker I wouldn't cry.
Tiger saying his friends and family played the biggest role in his success.
Yeah. I think he's the greatest golfer of all time. There's no doubt in my mind. You know, Nicklaus, well, he got the most majors. Tiger changed things the way that nobody's ever changed the game. And he also was at a time when, quite frankly, you know, the way that the golf exploded. I mean, every golfer playing today, right now I'm watching the Players Championship, which is what they call the 5th major in golf. It is insane, the prize money here this week. You come in 3rd, you win $1.1 million. It's all because of Tiger. $20 million online this weekend, not to mention the millions of dollars in endorsements and whatnot. Every one of these guys owes a thank you. And Nicholas was great, and Palmer was great. You go back and watch the days, and I watch them, and they're awesome, except for the fact that there was like 5 guys that were really full-time professionals. I was joke about. Tiger changed everything, and he did it at a time, too, where, he talked about what he encountered because it was still very much a white upper crust game.
Playing at some of these golf courses, I was not allowed in the clubhouses where all the other juniors were. The color of my skin dictated that. As I got older, that drove me even more.
Yeah. And I just remember him as a kid growing up. We'd go play Hartwell Park in Long Beach, and there he was every single day out there playing, him and his dad, hitting golf balls at 9 o'clock at night. And he's like 6 or 7. I'm like, it's the That's Incredible kid. Or Mike Douglas, whatever he was. 323-538-2423 at Chad Benson Show, your Twitter tweet. Text, love hearing from all of you. It's the Chad Benson Show.
This is the Chad Benson Show. Independent thoughts, independent life. This is Chad Benson.
Gas prices stayed steady overnight. That's good for most people, but the stuff that's baked in is about to get a little flavor for it as we move forward, as Ukraine continues to still be bombarded. Today, they sat down in Turkey. Erdogan, actually, the president, and Biden, the senile old guy who runs our country, they have been talking back and forth about what can we do, how do we do it. Erdogan is close to Putin, but he's a NATO ally, and he recognizes that this is the side he needs to be on. But at the end of the day, today, nothing came of it, and that is not going to change, especially when the demands are so insane.
The broad narrative that he conveyed to me is that they will continue their aggression until Ukraine meets their demands. And the list of those demands is a surrender. And this is why it is not acceptable to us.
Yeah. Surrender? Yeah, that's it. Give in. Of course, the Nazis, because everybody there's a Nazi, except for the part where that's not true. It's ridiculous. And it's costing everybody. It's costing Putin's people. Obviously, the devastation and the horror of what is taking place, including yesterday's absolute it's war crimes. Let's be real. Horrific incident took place at Mariupol.
There are images coming out of Mariupol of mass graves, just burying people in trenches. It's just horrible. And we can't confirm the 1,300, but, we do know that there are many, many dead there. There are thousands still trapped inside what is an ongoing hell. Nationally, at least 2.1 million people have now fled the country, most of them to Poland. Around half of them, children. Horrific numbers, but...
Yeah, and that's not going to change. And as that goes on, oil prices continue to rise. Yesterday, there was a down day in the oil market, but it wasn't because of anything crazy other than speculators will tell you speculators are taking money out. It's up about $3.5, $4 today, sitting at $115. I think a lot of people are taking a deep breath, waiting to see what can happen next. Is there another nightmare scenario? He is pounding the Ukraine. The missiles are flying in. And they're dumb bombs. They're not smart bombs. This isn't precision based. They're just firing stuff in. And of course, they hit yesterday. What took place when they hit the hospital is horrific, and it is getting uglier and uglier And over here and around the world, we're feeling it at the pump. We're feeling it with inflation. Today, inflation numbers came out, and I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but they're sucky.
The government's consumer price index surged 7.9% in February from the same month a year ago. That's another 4-decade high. The CPI report showed price hikes were broad-based in food, gas, and housing. Some economists had hoped this month could mark a peak in inflation. But with energy prices soaring again, more records will likely be broken in the months ahead.
Yeah. And that's what we're feeling here. Gas prices, inflation, and it's probably going to get worse before it gets better. Doesn't mean it won't get better. It just means at this moment in time, you're going to be feeling it everywhere.
Tamika Calhoun, who's raising 5 kids in Jackson, Mississippi, tells ABC's Nightline it's forcing some tough choices.
I have missed meals so that the kids could eat. I wouldn't tell them, of course, because they'll try to, share their food with me. We have a big family and the price of meat has gone up so much.
She's working overtime just to make it work.
It's about $100 each time I go to the grocery store.
But bracing for more hikes ahead.
And that's going to happen. Absolutely. Producer Phil and I were talking about this earlier. Just how the average family does it. The average household family, 60 grand, 55, whatever it is. How are they doing it? If you got mouths to feed, I'm blessed, right? And I got mouths to feed, but I'm blessed and I work hard to do what I do. But the reality is yeah, I do feel blessed. First of all, wake up every day in America, you feel blessed. But the reality of seeing what's going on over there, I think brings it home where I think if this was an everyday, and I think it's a good question to ask, if this was just something because of poor leadership, the poor way the government gets run, right? And policies that drove these prices through the roof. And that was solely the reason for inflation. I think people would be apoplectic. But I think when people go to get angry, and I've seen it, or they're getting frustrated, that's going to happen. I think what you're seeing more and more is people are taking a deep breath because they're seeing things on television in real time that make them go, well, you know what? All right, so tonight it's top ramen instead of a hamburger, but it's not that. My kids can eat. My kids don't have to worry about being blown up by the neighbor who decided that he didn't like our country. 323-538-2423 at Chad Benson Show is your Twitter. Tweet at us, text the program. We're going to be talking to a person who understands these marketplaces, the energy markets, and what could be done. Where do we see the long term? Where are we going to be in a year from now? The founder of Commodity Context Industry Newsletter, Rory Johnston is going to join us at the bottom of the hour. It'll be interesting to get his take. He's a Canadian guy who, when you look, Canada supplies us with the majority of our oil in this country that we import. So, how is this going to have an effect on them? How's this going to have an effect on us? Because as we all know, you take care of your own first. You do. You take care of your own. And it should be that way. And that's why, as they all run around and they scream and yell about, oh, this is baloney with inflation.
What specifically can you point to that has worked to bring down inflation?
Well, there are a number of steps we've taken. If you compare month to month, we've seen inflationary pressure or inflationary numbers go down month to month.
That was a lie. We walked you through it last hour, but we'll tell you it started at 1.7 last January, traveled all the way up. It got to 5.3, and then for a month it went down to, 5.4, then it went down to 5.3, and then it went down to, it stayed steady there for a couple months, and then it jumped back up, and now it's not. It's not gone down month to month. That's a lie. That's an absolute bold-faced lie. It's not hard to check these things, but they continue to throw that out there. Those are the talking points that people say, that they continue to push out, whether it's the 9,000 oil well leases that are available, which, again, those are available. A good portion of them are dry. So why would I want to buy a dry lease? They've already been worked. They've been found to be essentially useless. Others are worried, hey, there may be stuff here, but I got to get it to market, and I'm worried about what you're going to do with the pipeline. I am. Then you bring in lawsuits and regulatory stuff, and you can say there's 9,000 somethings, right? But if a majority of them don't work, and the ones that do, you're not quite sure how well they're going to work, and if you're even going to be allowed to do some of this stuff, yeah, it's, and you couple that with the fact that we're, the great resignation that took place. Finding workers, even in the oil world right now, is tough. So there's a lot that goes into it. But the disingenuousness of this and this is our energy secretary. I go back to this from yesterday. Listen to her giggle and you think to yourself, we are screwed.
What is the Granholm plan to increase oil production in America?
Oh my God. That is hilarious. Would that I had the magic wand on this. As you know, of course, oil is a global market. It is controlled by a cartel. That cartel is called OPEC, and they made a decision yesterday that they were not going to increase beyond what they were already planning.
Yeah. There you go. Therein lies the magic of what we have in front of us. You're seeing behind the scenes. What if I could? But I can't. My goodness, Chad, you're just being mean because she's a woman. No. Imagine this: you go to your doctor and your doctor says, "Hey, you got to have a heart transplant, right?" Not like the pig guy who died, the David Bennett guy whose pig heart didn't work, but or a kidney transplant. Doc, is there anything you could do? What if I could? Oh, man. But, it's a marketplace, and there's a lot of stuff going on out there. So, there's not a lot I can do. You'd be like, I think I'd find a new doctor. 323-538-2423. At Chad Benson Show is your Twitter. Tweet at us. Text the program. Rough Greens makes any pet food better. RUFFgreens.com/Chad. What is Rough Greens? Supplement goes on top of your dog's food. Vitamins, minerals, probiotics, omega-3, 6, 9. All the stuff. And what it does is you just put it on top of your dog's regular food. You don't have to change anything. And it brings your dog's food to life. It basically lights up those nutrients, does all the things it's supposed to, and makes your dog's food living comparatively to what it is right now, which is it's got a shelf life. It's meant to essentially live on a shelf for X amount of months and potentially years. And so that's not great. What does it do for your dog? Better energy. Great for the digestive system. Incredible for any of their aches and pains. Gives them it's just an amazing thing. And right now, Rough Greens wants you to try it before you buy it. It's called Canine VitaSmart from Rough Greens. You go to RUFFgreens.com/Chad, roughgreens.com/Chad, or call 833-MyDog77. You cover the cost of shipping. They're going to send you a bag absolutely free. It's that simple. RUFFgreens.com/Chad. Rough Greens makes any pet food better. Chad Benson Show.
I usually don't get into politics. As an ordinary suburban housewife, I feel a little disrespected. I teach my children not to name call.
You are a blabbermouth!
Come on, man. Guys, can we please keep the chatter to a minimum?
Chad Benson.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. Liftoff.
Now it's time to find out what's trending. What's trending? Yeah, what does that mean? I mean something, right? Like it's trending on the old internet. What's trending? All right, let's take a peek, find out what's trending. Start over in the Google world. Real Madrid, number one trending thing yesterday here in the United States of America. They beat PSG, Paris Saint-Germain, in an exciting game, and it was awesome, and I watched it. Obi-Wan Kenobi, watching the first trailer for the coming Disney show. Ernest Shackleton, they found his ship Endurance, lost in 1915 at the Wendell Sea, about 10,000 feet below the surface, in pristine condition. Ryan Coogler, if you don't know that name, he was the director of Black Panther. He was arrested yesterday for bank robbery because he didn't rob a bank. Showed up at the bank It actually happened a bit ago, but he showed up at the bank, and it's coming out now that, so with the withdrawal slip on January 7th, so he shows up, and he's asking for more than $10,000. And a note, it says, be discreet when handing him the cash. He's got a mask on, the whole 9 yards. The teller receives an alert notification, and then the police show up. People waiting in an SUV in the front. They ask him questions like, who are you waiting for? Is this guy? Who's this guy? Ryan Coogler. What's he do? He's a movie producer. He directed Black Panther. He's getting, and he said, look, I had to pay a lady who's a medical assistant who helps my family. And I just, I wanted to be discreet. I don't, want to carry around this kind of cash. And Bank of America since apologized. But again, not a good look right there. I often wondered, regardless of color, but, at what point does wearing a mask inside of a place? Because remember when, you go at Halloween time, they tell you a lot of places you can't wear your mask in. But now it's like everybody has a mask on. Or at least at that point in time. Tiger Woods. Captain Emotional last night, he was inducted into the World Golf Hall of Fame. Rightly so. Amanda Bynes, she is the new Britney Spears, not in the sense of talent or any of that stuff. She's the latest celeb that is trying to get her life back. She's been under a conservatorship for quite a while. And if you've not seen her, she started in What a Girl Wants way back in the day. And then somewhere she went off the rails. And to say that she went off the rails in a major way, she is at the point where she makes, at times, Britney looks like she's totally stable. No way. Yeah, absolutely. Head on over to Twitter. High-level talks between Russia and Ukraine failed to reach a broad ceasefire today in Turkey. That's not a shock. It's not going to be changing, I think, anytime soon. Apparently, President Zelensky has survived more than a dozen assassination attempts. No way. Yeah. Think about that for a second. That guy, I keep saying it, man, the cojones on that cat. Every day, and he's defying it, and he's winning. And every day, like my clients, our military analysts says all the time, every day he survives is a win. And Jesse Smollett is getting his comeuppance today. So we'll see what that looks like. This I found to be interesting. We'll touch on a little bit later, but burglary tourism. What is that?
Take a look at the surveillance video. Those are 4 burglars, all wearing similar clothing, carrying a safe from a home in Hillsborough last week. Police say there were credit cards inside that have already been used in Modesto and Gardena in Los Angeles County. After recovering 2 safes, Hillsborough police say this appears to be the work of tourism theft groups. They're investigating 3 separate cases, but think they may be connected to one group.
Yeah, we'll get a little deeper on this later, but it's... if you've ever seen The Purge, I think it was the second one, that people come from around the world to purge because it's fun. Now you've got people who are going, oh my God, they're not arresting anybody in America in certain cities. Feel free to do what you want. So they're coming over here like it's a holiday, and they're hunting, and they're just taking whatever they want with zero fear of repercussions. It is insane. It is. Oh, my God. We'll dig deeper into that. Let's talk a little oil and gas. Coming up next, Rory Johnston is going to join us. He is a oil and gas expert. He's the founder of Commodity Contacts, an industry newsletter. You can check it out on Substack. He's going to join us straight ahead to talk about where this market's going, how long are we going to feel this, and where could it get made up, if you will, as far as the lack of oil. Straight ahead, Chad Benson Show.
The Chad Benson Show.
Independent thoughts, independent life. This is Chad Benson.
The market goes up, it goes down. We got oil, we don't got oil. You got, people coming out saying, oh, there's plenty of things we should do. People like Jen Psaki.
What specifically can you...
And I'm just going to say this about Jen Psaki, right, before we get into this. She is supposed to be sent out there to play the game of oil and gas and all those kind of things. We get that, but still.
And there are 9,000 unused approved drilling permits. So I would suggest you ask the oil companies why they're not using those if there's a desire to drill more.
How about we ask somebody who was going to give us some real answers and not a bunch of gobbledygook that goes out there. Commodity Context. It's a Substack. It's awesome. I saw him the other day, and I've heard him a couple times. Rory Johnston joins us. And okay. We're talking off air real quick about, what's everybody ask you? And everybody listening wants to know, like, when is oil going to go down? And the reality is, I think, Rory, in this marketplace, God only knows.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for having me on, Chad. Just to put in perspective, I mean, oil prices have already come down a tremendous amount from how high they got earlier this week. We opened the week after all of the news of the weekend. We opened in Asian markets at, I think, $139 a barrel Brent. And as of right now, we're trading at about 110. So we've already shaved $30 off the price. The question is it going to stay off? Why did it jump in the first place? And kind of where are we going from here?
Yeah, and where we're going is, Goldman's, it's going to get to 185, and you have other people saying it's going to 200, and it's, we don't know where it's going to go, and part of that is because a madman is kind of holding the world hostage at this moment in time. But our supply, even before he went in and did what he did, the supply and demand was already starting to get a little wonky because we were getting back to pre-2019 kind of level of consumption.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you look at, so just to put in perspective, so last year in 2021, the oil market globally was undersupplied by about 1.5 to 2 million barrels a day in an overall market of about 100 million barrels a day of consumption, give or take. So call it 2% we were undersupplied last year. That was already enough to take us from the highest inventory levels the world has ever seen in oil, basically all of that stuff that flooded into inventories when COVID initially hit and the world shut off for a couple months. So that deficit was enough to bring us all the way down from that all-time high back down to the level that inventories were typically at in 2010 to 2014, back when we all kind of thought that oil prices were going to be above $100 forever, give or take, right? So we're back down to an already, low inventory level. We have tight markets. That was before the third largest oil producer in the world, Russia, which accounts for 10, 11% of global supply, decided to invade its neighbor, Ukraine. And the entire world basically, turned out and said, okay, well, that's definitely not good. We need to push back against Russia. So there's a whole suite of sanctions that were announced. But what's interesting is initially there was explicit carve-outs for Russia's energy exports, right? Global leaders knew the importance of Russia in the global energy system. They knew that prices were already really, really high. We've obviously already had very, very strong inflationary pressure that all of these politicians are very worried about. And gas prices are obviously very, very top of mind. So all that together, they wanted to protect Russia's energy exports. The challenge was that all of the companies that are actually doing the purchasing and refining and retailing of this oil were basically like, wait a second, this seems like a gigantic headache. We don't know how these policies and sanctions are going to change. We don't know really anything. This is an extremely fast-moving kind of situation. The only real kind of publicized purchase we saw after the invasion was by Shell, which bought a tanker. And they, and I think rightfully so, they put out a press release and they said, look, governments want us to keep doing this. They don't want energy supplies disrupted, right? Didn't matter. The entire world basically turned around and raked them over the coals, and they had to come out a couple days later and profusely apologize and say they're never going to buy it again. And we've seen a bunch of other companies do the same thing. So even before we started hearing all of the talk about these different export or import bans of Russian oil, all of these companies are essentially self-sanctioning. So now if we're talking about, we had, let's say, 2 million barrels a day of deficit before Russia-Ukraine, even if we lost 40% of Russia's 5 million barrels a day of crude exports, that doubles the deficit. And that's why we're in the situation now of prices seemingly having very little kind of ceiling to them. And you were saying earlier, whether it's the Goldmans or whichever kind of bank or forecaster you look at, everyone's kind of jostling to have the highest forecast right now. And I think the challenge is that it's really hard to put a number on the table. And thankfully, with my position right now, I no longer need to, at this moment, have an official forecast, as I did before when I was at a bank. But The challenge is, we don't know what Russia is exporting right now. We don't know what Russia will be exporting in 2 months when all of this really kind of sinks in. And then we don't know what they'll be producing in 2 years. We don't know if Russia's going to rejoin the global energy system, or we don't know if they're going to become the largest version of a global pariah state, akin to Iran and Venezuela and North Korea, which, fundamentally changes the entire global oil market.
Rory Johnston joins us. You can check out his Substack, Commodity Context. So all that being said, we here in America, North America, we get a majority of our oil that we import comes from Canada. What can, I think a lot of people want to know this. Oh, well, we were energy independent under Trump and we were this or we that. The reality is a lot of nuance, as we've talked about, that goes into certain things. We're still energy independent. It's just oil we're not. Is there anything we can do? Because I don't think people realize what it is and how hard it is to, as she talked about, there's 9,000 leases. It's not as easy as just turning on the spigot.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously much more complicated than that. And there's lots of, some of those leases are tied up in, litigation and opposition from local communities. And there's a whole host of things that kind of erode or kind of put that number into context. But I think even more important than that, there's this I think the two biggest things right now that are holding back a bounce back in U.S. shale production, which typically we would have expected to be growing gangbusters at prices even well below they are right now. And just for perspective, in 2018, when prices were, they peaked in the 80s, very, very briefly even, but were overall much lower than they are today. U.S. production grew by 1.5 to 2 million barrels a day that year, overwhelming global demand and crushing prices by the end of the year. So why aren't they growing now? Part of it is that, and just to put, and one more thing, the U.S. production is still about 1.5 million barrels a day below pre-COVID levels. So it fell off quickly, rebounded a little bit, but then kind of stalled out. So why? The biggest reason, and what everyone's talking about right now, is this idea of cash flow or investment discipline, that over that period, prior decade, when, the decade of U.S. shale emerging in the global market, they had this tendency to overproduce and kept crushing the price of oil. That's why oil prices were so low for so long after 2014. The downside to that for those producers was they kept growing production really, really quickly, very impressive, but they didn't make any money. In fact, they actually wasted or set on fire over $300 billion of investor capital trying to chase those prices higher. So after a decade of really, really terrible returns, these investors are saying, don't you dare try it again. Don't chase this price higher. So there's this question of management, incentives have changed. The kind of desires of investors have fundamentally changed, pre and post pandemic. And then there's also this question of supply chain bottlenecks. We're seeing it across the entire economy. This is why inflation is running so hot. But also on the oil and gas side specifically, you have shortages of labor. You have shortages of steel pipe you need for finishing these wells. You have shortages of sand that are used in the kind of fracking process. So I would say regulation, in my opinion, is a distant third to these kind of cash flow discipline and supply chain bottleneck factors. But given they're all happening at the same time, it's really, really difficult to pull them apart and kind of tease out which one is impacting things on a given day or even the kind of relative magnitude between them.
Talking to Rory Johnston, a commodity market analyst. You check out Commodity Context, it's Substack. It's really interesting reading if you're interested in this. One of the things I get asked a lot, and it's hard to put a number on it, is why they capped some of these wells 2 years ago when it fell down to like $22 a barrel. Is people want to know, well, what's it cost to get a barrel of oil out of the ground? You're not going to produce, if you're a small mom and pop, 200 barrels a day if you're losing $20 a barrel every single day. What's it cost to bring this stuff up and out?
Yeah, I mean, and just, this has been a moving target, right? And it has a lot to do with the cost structure, and some of those bottlenecks we're seeing are definitely pushing those prices up, but we're still definitely in profitable territory, basically across the entire, U.S. shale patch. Before the price collapse in 2014, before those low prices really forced these companies to figure out how to do it cheaper, more efficiently, and kind of on a shoestring budget at that stage, break evens were probably in the realm of $80 a barrel. After 2014, and basically by 2016, right through to 2020, when the pandemic hit, we're probably talking somewhere in the ballpark of $40 to $50 a barrel break even. So they cut those costs in half. Those are probably creeping up a bit, but I think, it's still safe to say that the majority of them are still under $60. So with, Brent prices right now, or WTI, just shy of 110, you have a lot of potential profitability there. So it's, the unit economics still make lots of sense. And if any particular company was to increase production, they'd probably increase, top and bottom line right now. I think the issue is that the owners of these companies, the equity holders, most people don't just hold one company. They hold a bunch of them or a basket of these companies. And in aggregate, it's not in investors' interest right now to have any one of those companies increase production for fear that they all kind of chase that same incentive. And then we end up in this position of overproduction again. Things are so volatile right now. We just don't know where we're going to be in 6 months.
Volatility, everybody asked me yesterday, why did the marketplace collapse the way it did? I said, well, yesterday was profit taking for a lot of people. They've been riding this thing, and they said, oh, let's take some of this thing and bounce, because the one other thing is this stuff trades publicly, and when traders see stuff like this, they love volatility, because if they're on the right side of it, it is exponentially worth their while to continue to throw money at it, but also to know when to get out and try to jump back in.
Yeah, exactly. And there were also a couple really, and so it's very, very true that I do think a lot of that was profit taking. And I think that what we've likely seen is that initial price spike has run ahead of any actual physical losses in the oil market. There was a really interesting piece that was released this morning by a firm called Kepler, which tracks various kind of tanker shipments out of a bunch of different countries, but specifically here, Russia. And what we've seen is that there really hasn't yet been a loss of physical exports from Russia. So that, shock hasn't hit yet, but it's probably coming. And the reason it's not showing up yet is that, typically when you purchase or a company purchases a shipment of oil, they typically buy it weeks ahead of time. So what we're seeing shipping out of Russia right now is cargo that had been purchased well before, or at least, generally before the invasion actually took place. So now it's this question of, okay, well, in a couple of weeks, where are exports going to be? Right now, they're probably still fine. We haven't seen a real acute loss of supply in the market, and that's being reflected in some of the kind of physical market signals like differentials. But, I think, given again that, Shell and others have kind of publicly said they're not going to buy any oil going forward. Well, the question is how much of that oil that was being shipped to Europe can be diverted elsewhere. It's hard to do because they don't have pipelines going elsewhere. A lot of those markets are kind of pretty locked in. So you can see some shifting, but I think it's going to be hard to see the full 3 million barrels a day or whatever that's going to Europe to get shifted to, Asian economies that aren't participating in the same bans and boycotts that we're seeing in the West.
Last question. We got about 30 seconds here. It's the quadrillion-dollar question. End of this year, because through summer, we're going to see these prices stay steady, especially when it comes to gas. But if things stayed kind of the way it is and Putin got muddled down, which is a possibility, are we looking at oil prices hovering in and around $100 for quite a while?
Yeah, I think, unless we see, Putin turn around and go home tomorrow and everyone just kind of pretend this all didn't happen, which seems extremely unlikely on both fronts, I think that supply is going to remain hindered. We could get more supplies from Iran. It looks like that's going to be possible. We could even see more supplies from Venezuela, but those won't really offset all of Russia's losses. I think the biggest thing that we're going to see by summer is, OPEC Plus will have mostly run out of their capacity they're planning on adding back to the market. The big question is by August, where are U.S. shale producers? Where are rig counts and where is that production coming? Without a material uptick in U.S. production, I think, $100 will be a low mark. I think that we could be in that kind of $120, $130 mark in kind of a steady state going forward here until we see a material pickup, particularly from the U.S. production.
Rory Johnston's his name. You check him out. Check him out at Rory Johnston on the old Twitter there. And Commodity Context, it's on Substack. Go check it out if you're interested in energy and stuff. Great articles, analysis, geopolitical with all the other stuff. Appreciate you coming on today and spending time with us. Hope to do it again.
Thanks so much for having me, Chad.
Thank you. At Chad Benson Show, Twitter, ChadBenson. Chad Benson Show.
If you're part
part of the politically exhausted majority. Don't fear. Your time to be validated and rejuvenated is here. Wake up. It's the Chad Benson Show.
I characterized this previously a couple weeks ago as the players and the league in almost two different economic paradigms and two completely different worlds, and talking about how the function of money would work in the sport of baseball. They're now moving closer because the players have made some sort of concession to move closer to where the owners were. And now it's a matter of whether or not they're going to hammer out the details, a lot of the finer points.
Baseball's doing everything they can to try to save a 162-game season. I think most people are like, I don't care. Right? You know, you guys, and I say this, right? And my dad played pro baseball. I joke about hating baseball. I don't hate baseball. But it's the game I would watch the least and do. You know, it's like playoffs are fun. Like opening day's cool. Like everybody's out there, they're having fun. You know, the crowd's buzzing. You know, you haven't seen it. And then by the the weekend rolls around and it's like, and then, okay, cool. Now, September, let me know what's going on. And then you have that great kind of weekend where you've got football starting and the playoffs and baseball are going. Baseball is a regional sport at the end of the day. You know, I'm out here in Arizona. Here's the reality of it. Man, not too many people care about the D-backs. In fact, the D-backs are probably, at this point, the third, maybe fourth most popular team. But in St. Louis, Chicago, that Eastern Corridor, they love baseball, right? Los Angeles loves baseball. Very regional. Seattle, Houston loves baseball. Now, what's their team like when they suck? Milwaukee likes baseball. But you start breaking it down. Florida doesn't care about baseball. They don't care anything about baseball. San Francisco likes baseball. Very regional. And the owners, they came out and they had a couple of people talk yesterday. And I was like, you guys don't need to do that. You don't need to set the narrative of what this is. A majority of Americans think the baseball players are on strike. It's a lockout. You lock them out. A lot of money, though. That's the thing about baseball right now. There's so much money in it because regionally, like the huge, the Yes Network and WESN and Time Warner are paying these baseball teams. They're getting contracts for 5 years or 20 years for like $8 billion. The owners kind of want to keep it the way it is, and you're not going to do that. Are you going to give? You better figure out how you do it. Maybe make the game 7 innings and let the batter keep the bat when he hits, even if he's running. Chad Benson Show.
This is the Chad Benson Show. Independent thoughts, independent life. This is Chad Benson.
Oh, it's ugly. It's getting uglier. It's going to get uglier in the coming days and weeks. We understand that. We're going to have a lot more about the Ukraine coming up because it's, be real, it's global impact of what is happening here cannot be understated. On the humanitarian side, which is the most important side of it all, not whether you and I have to pay an extra few bucks here or there, not whether you and I are frustrated because we can't get the thing that we want at a price that we think is reasonable, but the fact that we have got children and women and men who are being obliterated by a nut job. But here at home, we do have issues, and there's no doubt about that. And the issues are not getting any better, and they're probably going to get worse in the coming weeks and months. And that's just the reality of what's happening. Another massive jump in the world of inflation, and it is. We are going to feel it. We are. I'm not downplaying what people are going to be going through. I just want everybody to understand, and I think that's one of the reasons we aren't hearing people in an uproar. These weren't policies per se that put us here, even though there's some policies that are a nightmare and maybe have helped exacerbate things over the months. But we are all accepting the fact that we are blessed to know that our kids are going to school today without the fear of an errant missile being shot into their building.
The government's consumer price index surged 7.9% in February from the same month a year ago. That's another 4-decade high. The CPI report showed price hikes were broad-based in food, gas, and housing. Some economists had hoped this month could mark a peak in inflation, but with energy prices soaring again, more records will likely be broken in the months ahead.
And what's that mean? Higher prices on everything.
We are very likely going to see higher prices coming. And there's also the issue of the ripple effect of all of this. Gasoline, it filters into all of the products that we use, from our groceries to our clothing.
Yeah. But again, it's what we talked about: plastic, groceries, all of the things, the packaging and stuff. That all has an effect, and so much of what we're feeling is stuff that was kind of baked in somewhat. Great interview last hour with Rory Johnston, who is really a market kind of guy when it comes to the commodities market, talking about where this thing is headed, where it might be going, and is there places to make it up? If you miss it, grab the podcast. But he said, for the foreseeable future, $120, $130 a barrel is kind of, where we're going to be at, outside of him turning around and going home tomorrow, and then the world welcoming him back, and OPEC kind of opening some stuff up. And that's not a win in the economy. Now, the question is, how long does the goodwill last, right? Because, we're all behind the Ukrainians now, but eventually we're going to be like, well, hold on a second. This is kicking me in the butt. I was all for helping for a while, but it feels like everybody's feeling it. Gig economy, the everyday business owner and managers are feeling it in every way, shape, or form. This is not something that is going to go away tomorrow. We're going to have to figure out how we adapt here at home. And if you're the Democrats right now, blaming everything on the pooter isn't a winning solution. It's just not going to happen. People are smarter than that. But hey, all for the effort to blame everything on the pooter, but we saw where it was going long before this.
For gig workers like this Lyft driver at LAX, he says it's almost not worth driving any longer because the money he makes is going to gas.
I mean, you're barely making any profit.
And in San Francisco, Ron Dugant is a gig worker partially driving for Lyft and the rest of his time for DoorDash. He says when a trip comes in, he has to do some quick math to figure out if it's worth it.
Anything over 2 miles, and I need to make $3 per mile.
Drivers complain the gig companies like Uber, Lyft, and DoorDash have not kept up with gas prices and that more drivers are parking their cars rather than lose money.
Yeah, yesterday I spoke to several Lyft drivers and DoorDash, Grubhub, and they're all just like, it's not worth it. I mean, you're making virtually nothing on this. And to make what I made, months ago, I'm having to drive 15 hours a day, and that's not the whole reason they got a gig like that. But also think about it, these are all going to get passed on to the consumer as well at some point in time. And it's important because as we head into a election cycle that for this president is mightily important, because you are facing a situation where before Putin went in, people were asking serious questions about inflation. They were asked serious questions about the way you handled COVID. They were asking serious questions about the runaway, and I do mean runaway situation at our border, where you've seen 2 million plus people come in. And our senator here, Kirsten Sinema, said this past Monday, I was down at the border, and Yuma's saying every single day, it's a new record. Right? So you had a lot of issues: economy, inflation, your geopolitical nightmare in Afghanistan, the oil prices and gas prices rising, all of those things. This gives you a little cover for now. But if you get your ass handed to you, which a lot of people expect you're going to, you're going to spend 2 years doing what? Which is not good for our government, by the way, spending 2 years fighting over January 6th all over again and investigating Fauci for the never-ending forever. Not saying we don't look into some of those things, but the reality is that's what we're going to get. And I don't know if you're aware of this. I don't think people at this point in time, people ask me every day, and I get it, I think a lot more than, why aren't you talking about Bill Barr and what he said? I said, because for every one person asks me about Bill Barr, which is usually one, I get 30 tweets, texts, whatever it is, 100 some days. What's going on with oil and gas? Are we headed to a recession? Are we going to have a nuclear war? I mean, that's a big one, too. I'm getting that all the time. I get news people come up and ask me all the time. Well, I know you got sources. What do you say? My sources say, we're fine. That's what they say. I mean, not that let's be real. You've got a guy over there who's hinted, thrown about, pushed certain narratives that he is willing, if he has to, because he feels threatened for his country, that he would resort to nuclear war. But no, I don't think we're going to nuclear war. Is it possible? Anything's possible. But no. But, so you got all these things. And then we're going to have a massive election this year that you're going to be told is the most important election in the history of elections, because that's what we get told at every election. No election's ever like, this one, you could, damned if you do, damned if you don't. Normally, you can't. It's not a big deal. Nobody ever says that. So there is going to be a huge election. And the Republicans, you have everything in front of you right now. Now, you've been known to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory on numerous occasions, and I'm feeling that you're going to have the opportunity here to set a course in a way of taking the best of what you have, Trump, right, and eliminate the worst of what you had with Trump, and setting a path towards the White House. But my fear is you're going to overreach with insanity. You're going to spend more time chasing ghosts and goblins that don't exist rather than doing the things that people want. Like I say, I get a lot of people ask me questions about everything from the price of oil to how high can gas go to is there going to be a nuclear war. When it comes to so much of what I see, and a lot of other people, though, they're hyper-focused on still trying to put Trump back in office. You have a chance here, Republicans. What are you going to do? Are you going to be smart? Or are you going to be spending umpteen months and years trying to undo something that's not going to be undone because, quite frankly, there's nothing there at this point? And the second thing is chasing other ghosts because you feel you need to get an exact revenge on certain things. Don't do it. When the economy is flailing in certain areas, we're potentially facing a recession. People are worried about being able to pay for food. We'll see. Again, like I said, I think all of us have seen them continue to do things that make us shake our head. And that's every single. I mean, like, perfect example is look at the Democrats and their cult-like way that they approach the war when it comes to things like, I don't know, climate change. Yeah.
We are on war footing. We are in an emergency. And we have to responsibly increase short-term supply where we can right now to stabilize the market and to minimize harm to American families. And that means, at the same time, that war in Ukraine isn't the only thing that is sending shock waves through the energy sector. We know, you know, we have got to still reckon with the impact of climate change.
Do you think the people in Mariupol yesterday are worried about what kind of carbon footprint that the soldiers are leaving as they go to protect them and or get shelled? Come on. At some point, stop with the cult insanity. This is the problem. Talk about not reaching the average individual. This right here is what screams of just being tone deaf. 323-538-2423 at Chad Benson Show is your Twitter. Tweet at us, text the program. Love hearing from you. We're talking about Pig Guy. Guy got pig heart. He's no longer with us. Touch on that a little bit as well. Plus, burglary tourism. Oh, yeah. Wait till you hear this. This is fantastic, people. This is what I'm talking about. CarShield, right now, prices through the roof in every way, shape, or form. We know that one of the big drivers is the fact that used cars are up tremendously. And at this moment in time, you're thinking to yourself, I don't have a warranty, but I don't want to get rid of my car. What am I going to do? Well, CarShield, 24/7 roadside assistance, a rental car for free while your car's in the shop. You choose the shop. They get them paid directly. It's as simple as that. A million drivers been helped by CarShield. It's so easy. They got plans to fit everybody's budget. Don't get caught out in the cold. Don't get into a situation where, well, you have to make a choice that thousands upon thousands of dollars rather just making the smart choice now and going with CarShield. Go to carshield.com/Benson. Save 10%. carshield.com/Benson. carshield.com/Benson. Chad Benson Show.
Hashtag me too. Hashtag immigration reforms. Hashtag help. I'm trapped in a hashtag factory and I can't get out. The Chad Benson Show.
Take a look at the surveillance video. Those are 4 burglars, all wearing similar clothing, carrying a safe from a home in Hillsborough last week. Police say there were credit cards inside that have already been used in Modesto and Gardena in Los Angeles County. After recovering 2 safes, Hillsborough police say this appears to be the work of tourism theft groups. They're investigating 3 separate cases, but think they may be connected to one group.
What? Yeah, tourism theft groups. They're coming over here in droves to steal from wealthy people, and the reason is pretty simple. They know nothing's going to happen to them. At the end of the day, nobody's doing anything to these people, right? We don't do anything to anybody now. It's the start of the breakdown of society, is having 0 laws. And that's kind of what we have in a lot of these places. No law, right? It's just, it's kind of a law. It's more of a suggestion than anything else. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, you shouldn't do this, but all that being said, do you book that? Is there like something you do? It's like, hey, I got a great idea, guys. Well, I was thinking I was going to take the wife and the kids on a Disney cruise, but why don't we all get together and we go rob a bunch of people in America in certain cities and states, because nobody is going to stop us. That's just so ridiculous. It is. But when you have insane DAs who've allowed people to run free and do whatever they want with 0 repercussions, you start to see the breakdown of society. Which is, there are no repercussions. There is only reward, right? That's it. That's all you get. It's just reward. There's no punishment. There's nothing else. You can do what you want up to a certain extent. And even then, we'll figure out a way to make it feel like whatever you did to somebody, you were somehow the victim, especially if you have a certain skin color. It's just ridiculous. People talked about that, and and people brought this up from Chile and from and one of the guys who was like, comments on the piece was like, well, we shouldn't just demonize people from, and you're just like, they're coming here from other countries on visas you've caught them, and they specifically told you what was going on. It's not saying that people in Chile are bad. It's saying that these people are coming here because of your half-ass attempt at stopping people from committing crimes. God, stupid. Speaking of stupid, not unexpected, David Bennett passed away. If you don't know who he is, he's the guy who got the pig heart. So 2 months ago, he was close to death, and he needed a heart transplant and an experimental opportunity. They had grown a specifically gene-altered heart inside of a pig, and they gave it to him. He passed away. He had been going downhill the last few days, apparently, and he died. They're not saying why he died, but I'm going to go with he had a pig heart, but maybe I'm wrong. They're looking for ways, right? We've got a lot of people on a wait list, and they're looking for ways to get people organs. And, it's not the first time they've tried something like this. This was genetically altered, but he passed away. 2 months, though. Lived a little bit longer than I think people thought. 2 months with a pig heart. No, they didn't eat him. But that's what everybody thought. Chad Benson Show.
The Chad Benson Show.
Independent thoughts, independent life. This is Chad Benson.
Breaking news. Apparently the Biden administration is going to continue to extend, at least for another 30 days, the mask mandate on airplanes, because they're like, hey, you know what? Prices are going through the roof, and we want to make sure that if you're paying top dollar and the coronavirus is essentially not being talked about that much, and we can't do it to kids as much as we want to anymore, and the rest of America is not looking, at least we can do is make sure that everybody's uncomfortable on an airplane. Fantastic. Well, if you don't want to fly because you don't want to wear masks, then don't do it. I don't. Turned down several trips. I don't feel like spending hours upon hours in a mask. I just don't want to do it. Sorry. Not that I really want to go anywhere. That's the other side of it. I don't know if you guys are aware of this. Nightmare continuing. They met today in Turkey, and the powers that be of both sides tried to hammer out something which was never going to be, well, how should I say this, ever going to be agreed upon, and nobody believes anything the Russians have to say. This is Dmytro Kuleba, who is their foreign minister.
The broad narrative that he conveyed to me is that they will continue their aggression until Ukraine meets their demands. And the list of those demands is a surrender. And this is why it is not acceptable to us.
Yeah, not going to happen. Period. Case closed. End of story. Nor should they. Again, he's making demands. You invaded us, and now you're making demands on us. We weren't doing anything. Well, you were flirting with somebody I didn't want you to flirt with. You were flirting with the West. Your democracy was starting to get into my autocracy, and I didn't like that. Sorry. No. At the end of the day, do I still think, based on how many troops are there, that and the fact that he doesn't care, that this is going to get even uglier, and that they'll eventually take over enough of the country that you're going to see probably the military overrun what forces are there? Yeah. I mean, I think that's going to happen. But the fact that they've lasted this long, I think, has surprised a lot of people. They're not plucky. They're tough. They're fighting for their existence, not just as their existence as an individual on planet Earth, but their existence as people of the Ukraine, as Ukrainians. Lavrov, who was the spokeshole for the Putin and their foreign minister, he basically said, well, we're not going to invade anybody else because we didn't invade them. They invaded us. You're just like, who's that for? It's for the 62-year-old who's at home watching the Kremlin TV going, I knew they were full of Nazis. I just knew it. All the while, the young people are saying, no, we've got a workaround here because, A, you're not smart enough to realize all the things that people were capable of doing here to get the workaround. You've given us freedoms that we've enjoyed, and you can't shut everything down. You don't have that. And I think there's a lot of people hoping that the Ukrainians and the world can have them hold out long enough that eventually the script gets flipped, and instead of taking out the head of what they seem as the denazification and the evil, that on the other side, the economy gets so bad and the young rise up that eventually there's a coup or a replacement, if you will. I won't say regime replacement in Russia.
The Kremlin is accusing the U.S. of an economic war on Russia, one day after President Biden's ban on Russian oil and other energy imports. Russia's now scrambling to prevent economic collapse under a steady crush of Western sanctions. For everyday Russians, the real financial hardships are still to come, but there's now real fear of what's ahead. In an attempt to keep businesses afloat, Russia's now waiving some taxes and offering some financial help while banning foreign currency purchases.
Yeah, they're screwed. They are absolutely screwed. And is that going to cause him to get more desperate? I think that's absolutely going to cause him to get more desperate. And this is not something that is new. If you know anything about what this guy's like, think of Syria. Think of the things he's done in the past.
He's used this playbook before, which suggests it is a deliberate, malicious strategy to terrorize the population, force them from the cities, leave the cities uninhabitable or simply just too unsafe to be there, and then you move land forces in and claim it as yours.
Yeah. And again, he's done this in the past. He is going to do everything he can, and we as a civilized society must do everything we can to make it so untenable for his people, to get it through their heads that the only way this ends in a way where it doesn't escalate or you aren't bogged down for a decade in a war that you can't win because the opposition is going to be trying to kill your soldiers, your brothers, your sisters, your sons on a daily basis while you are becoming North Korea, is to pressure him so much that he's got to make a decision about not escalation, but getting out. But he only knows one thing. He's an elephant in a China store. Not a bull, but an elephant. And he's going to get through the door is the way that he sees fit.
I've seen it in the Deir al-Shifa hospital in Aleppo. It was struck 7 times during the war until it finally collapsed. You know, I saw operating theatres in the lobby and in the basement because those were the only safe floors left. And we're seeing the same playbook go out. Does this mean that Putin is mad? Well, of course, you've got to question the sanity of anyone who thinks it's justified to carry out indiscriminate bombings in civilian, heavily populated areas.
Yeah, but he doesn't care. And that's why you've got to make his people hurt. You've got to make his people hurt in ways they've never hurt before. And it's much easier than it was 40 years ago because now they've enjoyed modern westernized culture. Now they've enjoyed the Netflix, the Starbucks, the McDonald's, the all of the things, the travel, the freedom. That's the one thing that you think if you hold out long enough, and I don't know what long enough is, and could there be desperation? That's the other side of it. Chemical weapons have been talked about over the last 72 hours, and of course the nuclear aspect is never going to go away because he's got nukes. So the thought process is if we can make them so uncomfortable, I think, and these guys can hold out long enough, can there be some sort of change or at least some sort of capitulation where he pulls out, he gets a little bit of land, gets his ports and a way to get there, as Mike Lyons says, is one of the reasons he hasn't attacked Odessa is because he would have to leave a port for the Ukrainians, and if he goes into there, then all bets are off from where he goes from here. 323-538-2524. At Chad Benson Shows your Twitter. You can text me, tweet at me, do all these kind of things. I love hearing from everybody. Yesterday, I found this to be asinine. This is Gayle King, and again, it's the Brittany Griner thing yesterday. It's like, well, the only reason Brittany Griner is not the biggest story in sports is because she's a black woman, and I had to point out to everybody that's a bunch of crap. Well, Tom Brady's a star that she's nowhere near. So let's not pretend. If Venus Williams was there, Serena Williams, this story would be massive. So you got a basketball player that is currently sitting in jail somewhere in Russia being used as a pawn, right? Then you've got the likes of Joy Reid. It's like, well, what's going on in Yemen what's going on in Yemen we've talked about it, is a humanitarian nightmare. In a place where they fought for God knows how long, where the Constitution that's pretend is already being changed out by the time the ink dries, and 12, 13, 15 different people want to rule a country. It is horrible. Well, it's only because they're black. No, it's a nightmare over there. And it's been a nightmare. I'm 50 years old, 51. Since I was born, there's been conflict in the Middle East on a daily basis. There's been civil wars in Africa and everywhere else. The maps change every other day, it feels like. Somebody else is ruling it. In my 51 years, we've had peace. There was a Cold War, but we've had peace. There was no World War I when I was alive. There was no World War II. Gayle King yesterday talking about, well, it's only because they're white, basically.
A lot of people are starting to say, listen, when people were coming here from El Salvador, Honduras, they were not welcome. They were not really they were not received very well. When you talk about Syria and Afghanistan, too, what do you think is the difference here?
Well, it's simple. There's more fear of incorporating and integrating people from different races and different religions into national life. Let's be honest about it. Now, what we know from the history of this country, the International Rescue Committee was founded by Albert Einstein. We've worked here for 80 years and around the world for 80 years as well. What we know is that in the end, people fleeing for their freedom and for their lives, they're desperate to have a second chance. And the countries that they adopt as their new homes, they become patriotic and productive citizens because of the chance that it's given them.
Yeah, I think people need to be reminded of that. You know, we had time and time, you look at people coming from Haiti, people coming, as I said, El Salvador, Honduras. They were not treated this well. And I think we all want the Ukrainian people to be helped. Everybody agrees with that. But there is enough pain to go around here.
It's not the same, Gayle. People coming here for economic freedom is not the same as these people weren't, just by happenstance, we happen to be on our way to Poland. No, they were invaded. Trust me. Okay? They're being invaded. If he left tomorrow and said, I'm never coming back, a good majority of those people are turning around and going home. That's not happening here. It's not. That's, again, it's about race. Why don't you care about this? It's not the same. It's not. She didn't want to hear, oh, yeah, and the other thing is culture. By the way, the Poles and the Ukrainians are very close. Right? They're very close culture. They are. But I can tell you right now, if Russia somehow managed to invade Canada, the Canadians would come here. Of course they would. Would they rather be in Canada? Yeah, but they would come here. If Mexico got invaded by Brazil, they would come here. It's a different story. Zero to do with the color of your skin. All to do with a madman with a nuclear weapon is bombing indiscriminately with missiles. And you're fleeing for your life. Not running up here because of economic freedom, which we want people to have. Well, people treat other people bad. Yeah, there are people out there that are a-holes. Not going to lie to you. But God, talk about making about something else. Hey, these people are suffering. Let's talk about more. 323-538-2423 at Chad Benson Show is your Twitter. Tweet at us, text the program, wrap it up. Straight ahead, Chad Benson Show.
Don't let the Washington Beltway strangle you. This is where the exhausted majority comes to refuel, realign, and reevaluate. This is Chad Benson.
You've defied the odds every time. Being the first Black and Asian golfer to win a major. Being able to win your 5th Masters after multiple back surgeries. And being able to walk just a few months after your crash.
Awesome last night. That is Sam Woods, the oldest of Tiger's kids, delivering the speech as he is put into the Hall of Fame, and it was great. And he's the best golfer of all time. He's transcendent. Every one of these golfers that's playing right now, who think about this: you can play golf on the PGA Tour. Midland, finishing maybe, anywhere between 80 and 125 year in and year out, and pulling $1 million to $1.5 million. And that's all because of Tiger. The Players Championships going on right now. Prize money's $20 million. The third place finisher will get $1.3 million, I think. It is nuts. It is. And it's all because of Tiger. Tiger reshaped it, and Tiger, you look and you say, okay, who are people in sports who are transcendent? You can look and you go, Roberto Clemente, Babe Ruth, football, Lawrence Taylor, Tom Brady, Michael Jordan, Wilt Chamberlain. Golf, you had Arnie, and you had Nicklaus, and you had Tiger, and Tiger took it to a whole nother level at a time that was, in my mind, far more competitive. And it's amazing.
I was denied access into the clubhouses. That's fine. Put my shoes on here in the parking lot. I asked 2 questions only. That was it. Where was the first tee, and what was the course record?
And he did that over and over again. It's fortunate enough, I grew up in Cypress and Long Beach, California, and I golfed a lot. Played in a tournament when I was a kid. I was older than him, but he whooped everybody's ass. But I remember at least once a week, my buddies and I, we'd go play soccer, and then at night we would go to the golf course, Long Beach, Hartwell, and he and his father were out there every single night hitting golf balls when he was a kid. Before I even played, he was still just after the Mike Douglas, and then That's Incredible, and watching him at night just hitting on this little par 3 course, just golf ball. His dad would have 3, 4, 5 buckets there, and he was playing and playing and playing. It's incredible. 323-538-2423 at Chad Benson Shows your Twitter. Tweet at us, text the program. Solid, fun show today. We crammed in a lot and a lot more still to be talked about in the coming days and week, especially what goes on in the Ukraine. Check out the podcast if you missed any of it. Rory Johnston joined us. Check out his Substack, and he was just so invaluable when it comes to what's going on in the commodity markets, especially oil and gas, and where it's going. If you have a chance, grab that podcast. Have a beautiful rest of your day. Oh, my Lord. Is that it? I see Friday. Night-night, Jack.
This This is The Chad Benson Show.